Hello and welcome to Fireside with the VC. My name is Andrew Romans, and I'm very excited to have Zach Coelius from Coelius Capital on the podcast today. Zach, thanks for coming. How's it going?
Oh, good. My pleasure. Good to see you again.
Yeah. So Zach, I think we met, maybe you remember better than me, but I think we met at the Rise conference. Is that possible?
No, we met at a YC demo day at the Computer History Museum, probably 2015, 2016.
2015, 2016?
It was like a cocktail hour.
Okay. Better memory than mine. Because I remember you had invested in Cruise, which
Yes.
was one of your early investments, which was a big hit. And I thought we were talking about that at Rise. Well, so why don't we start? So you're a single GP running your own VC fund. This new fund is getting to a serious size. So you're beginning to be able to kind of realize your dreams, I would think, as a VC. But why don't you tell us the story? So operator turned VC. Tell us about the operator start first.
Yeah. So I like to joke I've never had a real job, which is half true. So I've been starting companies since I was a kid, functionally. And after grad school, I sort of jumped in my car and drove across country and showed up here in 2005. Just, didn't really know anything and started crashing conferences and just sort of like trying to figure out how to break into tech. I had started the first online voter registration platform back in 2002. So kind of had a little bit of experience in tech and building tech, but this was my first like VC funded tech company sort of exploration, and then sort of stumbled into an idea that people liked and started raising money and raised more money and more money. And next thing you know, that was like a 10-year journey. So my sister and we effectively started it together, and it became one of the very first ad tech platforms. So direct competitors to Trade Desk, which is now a $30 billion business, and a whole bunch of other folks like that. And so ended up being a 10-year journey, which is a story in and of itself. And at the very end of that, we made the mistake of partnering with Facebook, which is sort of like direct injecting heroin into your veins. It feels really good until it doesn't feel good at all. So I have a scar from like here to here from them gutting me and the business. Very painful.
That is a great story, and I've heard this before. So tell the listeners, what were you doing, and what did Facebook use, and then how did they, essentially like they just copyright meant right to copy or something, right? Like what happened there?
Yeah, so I had known the Facebook team since it was virtually nothing, the ad scheme anyway, and had for many years had been badgering them to work with them. We were like, because we worked with big direct marketers, folks who were selling Home Depot, Booking.com, Vistaprint, Walmart, you name it. And we helped them basically run their ads online using data, which now is a common word, but back then that was a big deal to be able to target the right person with the right ad at the right time, so that it was highly relevant. Because if you can put the right ad in front of somebody who actually wants it, they're like, "Ooh, I want that." They'll click on it, they'll buy it at much higher rates, and it works better for everybody. And the Facebook ad platform when it was first built was total garbage. Like they had built it absolutely wrong. They just basically copied what they had done at Google, and it didn't work very well. And so we had been for years badgering them like, hey, let us help you. Let us buy from you. Let us use our stuff, because our stuff worked really well. And so right before Facebook went public, they missed their Q4 earnings. And Zuck went to the ads team and was like, guys, what are we going to do? And they because Zuck up until then had been very sort of dismissive of ads and didn't let them do anything. And they were really relegated to sort of like the little tiny little fingernails in the right-hand rail, which nobody clicked on because they weren't relevant. And so one of the members of that team was a guy named Antonio Garcia Martinez, who's famous now for having written a book called Chaos Monkeys about that journey. And so he and I had been talking at that point, and I was like, dude, you got to bring data. And he's like, I know. And I was like, dude, I can help you. And he's like, I know. And so then when Zuck went to the team and was like, what are we going to do? He was like, hey, what if we allow data? And Zuck's like, go for it. And so effectively, I think they had 10 ideas they took to him. And one of them was to enable folks like us to buy from Facebook. So, and Antonio's book is great. It covers this whole story at incredible length, and he's a great writer. So we were basically brought in to be a partner for them and to buy on their platform using data. And it was amazing how effective what we were able to do. Like before, their ads were selling for like 3 cents, and they would get, if they were lucky, 1 click for every 3,000 ads. So you show 3,000 ads, you get 1 click. So effectively, that means you're paying, call it 9 cents a click. And so using
was that
our
when he
technology,
was that when Zuckerberg was putting it down in the very, very
no
deep?
right-hand rail, little tiny thumbnails, like total garbage. And so then with our tech, we were able to get 3 clicks for every 1,000 ads. So effectively, we were paying 1 cent per ad. So effectively a 10x improvement. And our customer, the great thing is that because the ads were highly relevant to the right users at the right time, the downstream sort of result was people bought a lot of stuff. So the ROI actually went up on the conversion rate of the ads actually went up substantially. So the effective rate that our advertisers could pay was about 100 times what they were paying before. So if they were advertising on Facebook before using us, they could pay and the effective sort of measurement, they could pay 1/100th of what they could pay with us. And so, our business went, we literally went from $1 million in revenue to 30 million in revenue in like 12 months. We had 300 million in revenue on the books ready to go. And Antonio tells this story in his book, but effectively Cheryl and the team had a big sit down. And the question was, okay, this works. Are we going to do it ourselves, or are we going to keep working with these partners? And Antonio was like, ecosystem good. And other people at Facebook were like, fuck those fuckers. Let's do it ourselves.
What about acquisition good? Why not just, bring the DNA internally? You get a slice of a growing pie. It just wasn't they're an inquisitive company. It's not like it's Apple Computer. You think of Apple as they prefer to steal than to, acquire. You think of Cisco as the acquisitive, Google's the acquisitive. They just said, we're going to make it ourselves and not let you.
So what they ended up doing was they went to a bunch of us and said, we're going to build this and you need to help us. And I was like, fuck you. And another company was like, okay. And they helped them build basically a version in-house for free. And then the terrible thing was then they went to all of our customers behind our backs and were like, hey, you know how you used to use Trigit and you have this great product that works really well? Now you need to come work with us. And by the way, our product works like 1/10 as well, but guess what? We're shutting off Trigit. So you got to come to us. And then the worst part was they lied to us through this whole process. So we're sitting here watching our traffic that they were getting from them going down, even though we have the data, so we can see every day what's going on.
You know exactly what's happening.
We can totally see. We're we can see every single, and we can see everything. And so we're watching what they're giving us going down, and then we'd go to them, we'd be like, guys, and they'd be like, oh no, everything's okay. And then we would our sales team would show us the deck that they were. It was total dirty pool. But yeah, it was rough.
So there's a bunch of interesting lessons for entrepreneurs in here. One is you commit to a business, you're an entrepreneur, you've got grit, you've got staying power, you're not abandoning ship the first time that you get into rocky, choppy water weather. The other hand is, when is the right time to extract yourself from a business, especially when you've dragged everyone that likes you, loves you, trusts you, built relationships, and you're like, me, do I want to be here for another 30 years? I've proven I can last for 10. And then you had this injection of the heroin of Facebook that your product actually worked. It actually did a great job, showed them the path to monetization. So that almost filled you full of fake muscles and then dropped it out. And then you're like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So what happened there, and what lessons learned can you give to entrepreneurs at this point?
Have you ever seen the movie There Will Be Blood?
Yes.
With Daniel Day-Lewis?
Yeah, it was hard to watch, actually. Yeah.
Amazing movie, right? It's all about effectively oil prospecting, and then the building an oil business, and then all of the consequences of that whole journey. And I kind of break down the startup journey into, it's almost an exact copy. So you've got kind of 3 steps to the process. First, you have to go find the oil. So that means you're a prospector. You're like, you put your backpack on, and you get your pick, and you go wander around until you dig holes until you find it. And the great thing in startups are the same thing with finding product market fit. You have ideas, you go build MVPs, you put them in market, and people respond to them or don't. And just like the oil business, when you hit a gusher, oh my God, it's crazy. Like, you find product market fit and your business just goes to the moon. That was our experience. Like, in the 10-year journey that we went on for years and years and years, it was like brutal, hard, dig, not finding like anything. We got to $1 million revenue, was like the hardest million I've ever had to grow to. Then we hit it. We found the gusher. And so then once you find it, and I think in a lot of ways for the startup journey, that part of it is, don't ever give up until you lose energy searching. Keep searching, keep looking, because eventually, in a market like we're in now, where it's just so much opportunity all around us, you're gonna find it, because it's there. It's all around us. I mean, literally, like, it's everywhere. All you got to do is just keep looking, and you'll find it. Then once you find it, once the business starts to grow, then effectively, in a lot of ways, the business inverts. So in the beginning, finding revenue and traction and customers, super duper hard. But once you find it, then suddenly that becomes super easy. It's crazy. For us, we went from basically like these same customers that we'd been calling on for years, and then we like, set up a call, and we'd go through the pitch, and we'd run them through the product, and they'd be like, obviously bored. And at the end of it, they'd say, yeah, can you call me back? Maybe next year. It was just like brutal. And then when we found it, we'd call up those same customers, Walmart, Best Buy, Home Depot, TripAdvisor. We'd schedule a call, me and my sales guys, we'd get on the call, and we'd be like, hey, so we can give you data-driven ads on Facebook. We can give you retargeting on Facebook. And they'd be like, send me the contract. And we'd be like, okay. Literally 2 minutes into the call. And we used to have races to see who could get to a contract the fastest on the call. And it was like, brrr, and the customers were like, here's money, please go. Because we were printing money for them. Like, it was funny, at one point we had Walmart in Brazil. The CEO down there was kind of a dick. And he got mad at us because we didn't bend over for him in the way he wanted us to. And he was like, I'm going to shut you off. And I was like, go for it, buddy. Like, I can see your numbers. I know I'm making you $1 million a day in revenue. Like, so you shut me off. Have fun with that. 4 days later, he called back and apologized. He was like, I'm sorry. And we were like, hey, we want to be a good partner, but don't be a bully. And like, we turned it back on. And woof, there we go. $1 million in revenue, just like immediately hit his books. And so effectively, once you find it, go back to the analogy, then you got to, and everything inverts. So revenue, traction, customers become really easy. Now you got, just like in the oil business, now you got to build the business, which means you got to build those oil derricks. You got to hire those people. You got to build the pipelines. And there's a whole world of building that needs to be done once you find that oil. And that building is hard. And it's a different process than finding oil. It requires a different skill set. It requires a whole different group of people. And it's just as hard as finding oil is to build and extract it. Just as hard as finding product market fit is to scale it. And it's like a whole different world. And then the third step is the hard part, which you got to keep it. And that's where the competitive pressures come in. That's where government regulations come in. That's where, like, if you think about there will be blood, the blood comes in. There's a whole bunch of like people want to steal from you when you find value. Right. And so to kind of carry the analogy through onto Facebook, the problem we had is that we didn't go find oil in the middle of nowhere. We found oil on Facebook's ranch. And that was great because we showed them where the oil was and we got it out and we were killing it, but we were still on their ranch. And it was their armed guards that patrolled that ranch. And so when the time came, they were like, well, do we want you to be on our ranch? Or do we want to do it ourselves? And they were like, and that was the end of it. So for that analogy, I think holds. And so from a startup journey perspective, as an entrepreneur, you kind of always have to think about those steps and think about how to basically to manage those steps as effectively as you can. And so in the beginning, it's about searching and discovery, and just keep searching and keep exploring. Then it's about building, which is get really good at building. And then the last bit, it's like you have to have a moat. You have to be protected from competitors. You have to basically have a way to basically keep people from taking it. And that's intentional from the beginning. Like, and so if you go build on top of Facebook, you have no moat, and they can take it whenever they want.
Right. And to some extent that happened. And how much capital had you raised for the business? Like, assuming a one-time liquidation preference, where, you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but like, roughly where were things sitting at when Facebook kind of unplugged you a bit there?
We had raised about $25 million in total capital. And yeah, when the rug got pulled, we went through a crazy sort of sale process.
So it went straight to sale. So it went straight to sale.
Well, it took about a year.
You didn't do a down round or anything like that, or
we did some bridges to stay alive, and we tried to pivot, but the problem was like a lot of us had run out of energy. And the biggest thing that's like really difficult is you built this business with this revenue and team, and it had revenue growth and customer growth, and everything was growing at a very fast clip. I mean, very, very fast. Like we literally were going to we had 30 million in revenue. We had 300 million clearly on our way in 12 months. Like we were on that kind of growth path.
Right.
And so then when I went to the board and I was like, so we're getting fucked. And because what was funny is I had found out about a year before, because I had been at a party at Facebook, and I met, we were there drinking and hanging out in the sort of their center area. And I was talking to this engineer, super smart guy. And I was like, oh, what are you working on? He's like, oh, I'm building a dynamic creative retargeting engine on top of our platform. I was like, oh, you mean? And I started asking questions. And it was clear this was their first generation, but it was like an exact copy of what we built. Like everything, he just copied it. And I was like, okay, well, thanks for telling me that. So I went to the board and I was like, well, we're fucked because Facebook's building. And they're like, well, maybe it won't work. And I was like, so when you think about it from a risk reward perspective, that's actually the right bet. When you've got 10x growth in front of you and the CEO is like, okay, I got to pivot because we might die here. If I'm the board, I'm like, well, there's probably a 90% chance you die, but 10% chance you win. And if you do win 300 million in revenue, that makes you a X billion-dollar business. Let's take the risk. And I think that was the right risk for if you had sort of like a giant Monte Carlo, that would be the right risk to take. But in this case, it was rough. It was rough. So then anyway, long story short, then they gutted us, and our guts were hanging out, but we were still alive. So for about a year, we were like clearly gutted, but still alive. And then it was tricky because it's like, okay, do we lay off the team? Do we go back to exploratory sort of mode, lay off 95% of the staff, go back to finding the oil again, or do we try to make it through? Do we try to pivot? We decided to try to pivot, and we didn't pull it off because what you don't realize as a startup founder is that like when you have 5 people, pivoting is easy.
Right.
We had pivoted 7 times. That was trivial. Like I'm good at pivoting, but once you have 50 people, pivoting is impossible. Like
which by the way, in this 2021 year we're living through with premature growth rounds happening, these companies are going to have a tougher time, sailing a dinghy as opposed to an aircraft carrier where that pivot is just going to be way, way, way harder. But I mean, by the way, before we go any further, Zach, I think that there's a whole generation of newly minted VCs that everything they touched turned to gold because they worked there, and they, didn't live through 01 downturn, or, there's older guys that are talking about like 57, 1987 or whatever. But like I lived through 01 and 08 for sure.
Yeah.
And then also I've seen like individual shipwrecks many times and then experienced them myself. That I think you bringing that to the investor side for the generation you're investing with is very healthy and useful. It's just useful to have someone that's been around that even emotionally. Now, isn't it true that your mom died, your house burned down? Like it was the country song playing backwards or something there.
Yeah, no, it literally, I'm glad I didn't have a dog or a truck, because my dog would have run away that year and my truck would have broke down, because it was a country song. It was like everything that can go wrong went wrong. Yeah, got divorced.
Okay, so let's talk about the Phoenix after this. So you've got this amazing experience, and Naval. I regret not being early on. Is it Naval told me about his plans for syndicates,
Yeah.
and I was kind of king of the SPV at the time, doing Georgetown Angels, where I don't know if you ever went to, but we were doing these events in San Francisco, New York, where I have some buddies pitching, and we're saying you can invest in all three through our SPV or just one. And a lot of people going direct, and we're like, hey, pay it forward. Who cares? Have a drink. This is our community. And Naval at the time was saying there would be zero management fee. You're expected to be like a Facebook employee who goes to the ATM of vested shares every quarter or something. And then you get 15% carry was my memory of the original offer. And it looked a bit like we had to bring our own LPs to an extent, and then our LPs, like our precious Japanese or whatever, would then be, someone's going to pimp out every other deal in the Valley to my people, kind of thing. And I look back as it was a mistake to not be early, but tell us your story. So you went from burnt down house, family literally in trouble, and then you got the Facebook full mouth treatment there, but a lot. So what did you do then?
I mean, the beatings will continue until you learn. It's pretty brutal. So what happened was that was effectively that the bad year was kind of the 2014 to 2016. And so we sold Trigget in this crazy wild transaction. We sold actually two companies at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. And so that was this wild period. And in that moment, and the lesson I would give to any entrepreneur is, in that moment, just understand that it's not as horrific and life-ending and horrible as you think it is. And so in the same way that, like, when you lose someone you love, you feel like the world has ended and it's never going to ever be sunny again. Time eases that, and you have that in larger context. When your company collapses and then you have to sell it, it feels like the world ends and it's never going to be sunny again. But like it does get better.
I think there's a key moment where, as an entrepreneur, your startup is your everything. Like if you're not pitching every Uber driver and cab driver your entire business, you're not on fire yet. Like I remember I was at a party and one of my classmates goes, Andrew, are you pitching this woman your ATM signaling gateway? I was like, I guess I am. Everyone's going to get this pitch if they, interact with me, during the day or after dark, whatever. But the key thing, there's a key moment where you begin to see your everything baby startup is part of a portfolio. That you're like, if something comes out of that, that's great, but I'm now going to consider there's other things. And it's actually a transition point,
Yeah. Now you hit it, you nailed it. Eventually you see it in context, and then you just want to remember that when you're in the middle of the maelstrom and people are punching you in the head and people are lying and cheating and stealing and the world is collapsing around you and it feels like everything's going to end, and you want to remember your reputation gets made in those moments, and the things you do will come back to haunt you if you do them wrong, and you will be able to stand by them forever if you do them right. And I did both, unfortunately, in that I made some mistakes that I regret. And I will always regret. And I also did some things right that, you know, people are like, well, you got to give it to Zach. He will fucking stand in front of the firing squad and take the bullets. But anyway, well, that's a whole different story, which I don't want to get into publicly. Needless to say, so what happened was we sold the company, and I was, you know, a lost, wet, broken puppy, like wandering along the curb, trying to figure out what to do with my life. And one of the companies I'd been advising up until that point was a company called Branch Metrics. So I'd introduced him to their seed investors, NEA and Ben Narrison. Well, I introduced him to Ben Narrison. He introduced him to NEA, but that led to their seed round. And then Scott Sandell, who did the round, being as smart as he is, was like, Zach, I'm gonna lead the A. And I was like, awesome. Can I do this new Syndicate thing? AngelList had just started the Syndicate product. Can I try it? Because I had heard about it from Gil Pencina. Gil Pencina was like, hey, there's this Syndicate thing, you should do it. And I was like, oh, cool, okay, let's try it. And you know, I talked to people about it, and people were like, well, it's bad, you're gonna get sued. People are using it for money laundering. It's like a whole, I mean, everybody thought I was crazy, and I was like, I got nothing to lose. My life is fucked. So like, let's go for it. So literally I wrote the memo, put it up on AngelList, sent an email to all my rich friends, and 24 hours later, the deal was full. And I was like,
and how much was that? Yeah. So how much did you pull together for that first?
$200K into the, I think it was a $15 million Series A.
Going in with Scott Sandell.
With Scott
joining
Sandell.
Board number 37. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, the great thing is my rich friends were like, well, who knows about Zach? We're investing behind Scott Sandell. That's easy. Boom. Here's the money.
No, that is true. They're getting access with a small check to, frankly, not so easy to get Dick Kramlich to have lunch with you and put your minimum, $25 million check into NEA's latest 1.2 billion that Sandell's running around with.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's access, you know. Okay, so that came together.
That happened, and I was like, oh, I'm an investor now. That's cool. You know, purely just sort of dumb luck. So that year, while I licked my wounds, one of the things I did was I met with other startup founders and companies, and you know, and I ended up leading actually 5 more syndicates, raised about $1 million in aggregate. But the next deal I did was a company called Cruise. And I knew Kyle from...
Wait, you're jumping over HelloSign. I'm a HelloSign.
HelloSign comes later.
Oh, it comes later. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had been... So Joseph, the founder of HelloSign, was on my debate team in college. And my ex-wife was best friends with him. And she and I had convinced him to move out here to the Bay Area, and had been sort of like helping him, you know, figure it out. And he did a bunch of different things. And so then when HelloSign started, I became an advisor and helped them kind of like figure it out. And then when they went through their fundraise process, the original money from USVP, I sort of helped them do that. And so I was kind of along the ride, but I had not yet invested.
And how long, I mean, Dropbox bought them ultimately, right? So how long of a journey was that from you were advising them on their first money in, plus said, come on out, you know, go get away from your parents and come out West?
Yeah. You know, I don't remember.
That's okay.
Yeah, I want to say we sold it to Dropbox in, let's see, it's 21 now, 20. I think in 19 we sold it to Dropbox. That sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
So it might have been close to a 10-year journey. I mean, it's, you know, these things are always 10-year journeys.
Yeah.
But no matter what, it's always
the overnight success that
10 years overnight success, make billions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I tweeted yesterday about how weird it is sometimes where in the VC world, you get involved with a business, and sometimes you do a lot of work, sometimes you do no work. And I tweeted yesterday about how weird it is when you get a huge paycheck on some of these businesses where you did no work. You get like this gigantic obscene check for having done nothing. And it's just a weird feeling. Like you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, how the fuck? This is so weird.
There's some wisdom in that, though. There's probably some, you know, wisdom in that, which is like diversification, or, you know, or double down, or the data will speak to you. You know, it's like, you know, in there. So it may look like it's nothing, that I worked so hard for nothing but a kick in the nuts that went on for months or years. And then all of a sudden, from just behaving myself, and maybe it was your good behavior of taking those bullets and that somehow came over to you getting this bar of gold gifted to you years later.
It's hard to know. Some, like you said, some of these things are the hardest thing you ever did and you get nothing, and others of them, like you get a bar of gold for doing nothing. And it's just a weird business. Diversification, I think, having a portfolio, a big diverse portfolio, and realizing you don't know where the gold's going to show up, and being open to the fact that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and having patience and having a long-term view in this game. Yeah, I mean, literally, like everybody I know in this business who has a long-term view, who's a good, honest person. The liars, like I love the fact that the liars and unethical people in Silicon Valley, like they may win in the short term, but they almost always lose in the long term. They always end up failing, going out of business, going to jail. Like they're just but the long-term people who've worked hard, who've been good, ethical people, they all have succeeded. Like, I mean, of my friend group, like the number of people who've exposed themselves, which is very important, expose themselves to a portfolio of leveraged upside. It's not like some people have gone and worked on one problem for 30 years and not succeeded, but as long as you've got a portfolio of a bunch of different things that can go up, like one of them is going to make it, and you're going to end up getting very wealthy in this game.
By the way, what's interesting is the mass migration brought on by COVID is bringing people from the Valley who are used to operating in an ecosystem with choice into provincial ecosystems where there was not a lot of choice, and someone could have been behaving rather badly but had a checkbook, and now you've got people coming in with a whole different attitude of like, I didn't have a monopoly in Silicon Valley by any means. I had to earn everything, the right to be on anyone's cap table, et cetera, add value, not be a bad operator, at a minimum invest and shut up or be on call when needed. So we're seeing some changing on the culture of what works and what doesn't work everywhere.
It's good.
But so all right, so you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think it's like one of the best things to ever happen to our country. Is like, we used to have all the smartest, hardest working people all had to go to Silicon Valley or New York or to make money, because you had to be in the game. And so you ended up with this incredible concentration of talent in these really small areas, crazy housing prices and all that. And then you ended up with effectively a brain drain out of the rest of the country, because those young, smart kids were like, well, I can work on the farm or I can go get rich in Silicon Valley. So they all went out to Silicon Valley. And like that, like, I think you can look at national politics right now is really representative of that. And like, it's just like, it's really unfortunate. And now we have, because of this, which is amazing, Zoom and everything else that comes with it, those smart kids are now going back, and they're bringing with them what they learned, and they're bringing with them who they know. And now they're going to be building amazing companies, and they're going to be helping to rebuild those communities, and they're going to bring jobs. And like, I think it's going to be just really fabulous for our country. Like we desperately need it.
Oh no, I think it's so good in so many ways. And if you remember your startup now being like 14, 15 years ago, finding an angel investor wasn't so hard, wasn't so easy. Like I remember going to the nvca.org, starting with A, when I was looking for funding in the 90s, So the ability to build a startup anywhere, within these 4 time zones is like amazing now. So you kick off this first 200K SPV syndicate on AngelList, thanks to Naval's model, using your own network. People know you. It was easy to follow you in onto a deal with Scott Sandell, but wasn't Cruise like deal number 2?
Yeah. So Cruise was deal number 2. It's funny. First 3 companies turned into unicorns. The third one's not yet officially a unicorn, but it's already there in revenue.
Okay, so mathematically, statistically, very improbable.
Dumb luck. Yeah.
So I mean, look,
the karma of the beatings that I took, inverted, and like all of a sudden it turned into this massive, wonderful, streak of beautiful good luck. I just wish I had that now that I have like real capital. So instead of putting in 200K, I would put in like 5 million.
Yeah, but that's not how the universe was working for you. The bar of gold was 3 hits. So first 3. So second one, what was it, like a year later? GM bought it for $1 billion or more, was it?
Yeah. So it's funny. So I went to lunch with Kyle. So I had known Kyle from the Justin TV days, from the very beginning, like literally when he was like trying to figure out if he should drop out of MIT. And I was like, this kid's smart. And I was like, hey, you should come work for me. And he was like, fuck you, you're an idiot. No, but he never was, he was never willing to do that. And so I'd known him for years. And so then in that year, while I was kind of figuring out what to do, I just started reaching out to friends and catching up for coffees and, just generally networking. And so he and I went to coffee over near the courthouse down in Soma. And he was like, oh, we just raised a round from Spark. And I was like, oh, Spark was on my board. I can help you with them. Can I invest in your company? And he was like, sure. And here's a small 100K slug in the A. So Nabil had led, and I knew Nabil pretty well, and I knew Spark pretty well. So I had 100K into, not a big check, but whatever. But
let me jump in and say that a lot of people, when they're starting off in venture, they say, well, if my total amount of personal capital or fund capital I've managed to scrape together is small, I should therefore only invest in pre-seed, pre-company formed stage. Whereas the pattern I'm seeing here is that you've been around long enough that you have an entrepreneur network, you see people getting like Spark, NEA funded, and you're getting little allocations. You manage to technically get it up and running on AngelList, hit your own network of people that have seen you in good and bad days, and you're providing rare access with the small check commingled through a syndicate. So that not everybody, I mean, that's a bit of like, yeah, I put in my decades in the Valley and now this is what I can do for you.
There's a lot to unpack in what you just said. Access is everything in this business. And like, I'd known Kyle for 10 years. I'd built a reputation with him. I knew him well enough that like, I don't know shit about self-driving cars. I mean, I'm a geek about self-driving cars in terms of like the impacts, but like the core hardcore AI technology. They just announced that they just had their first fully driverless ride through San Francisco like a few days ago. Like no driver. That car drove around San Francisco with no driver, Kyle in the back seat. Like it's a huge breakthrough, right? I mean, like that's a technical problem that I am not capable to underwrite because it's just requires a level of technical expertise that I don't have. And so you can look at this opportunity here. It's like, okay, we have driverless cars, which are literally like 30,000 people a year die because of idiots behind the wheel who crash into other people and kill them. 30,000, just in the US alone. I think it's like 40,000, big fucking number. And it's like a huge amount of economic, trillions of dollars of economic value. So it's a big business opportunity. But yet we've got this technical approach, driverless cars, and it requires AI, and it requires deep learning, and it requires big breakthroughs in sensors. And it's like all these hard problems. And like, here's me, Mr. like doesn't even have a technical degree. I mean, I'm technical, but I'm not that technical. How am I going to underwrite that? And the answer is, I've known Kyle for 10 years and I've watched him in action. And he said to me, I think we got this. And I know that he doesn't lie about that. That's the sort of thing where he's like, I think we got this. And he's consistently solved big, hard technical problems over his 10 years that I'd known him. And when he said, I think I got this, he got it. And I was like, okay, you got it. That core of knowing the entrepreneur, he knows me, and then I can provide value because I knew the Spark people. That's a hard thing to replicate. But it's also the second part that I would add to this is like a lot of people, when they get in the investing game, they basically come in with this like, oh, I have to like operate like a VC firm. So I have to build a portfolio of a certain type of company at a certain stage and a certain and I think that's the dumbest thing that you could ever possibly do, because the hard part about this business is access. It's being able to get access to a great company where you know it's a great company with a great founder that you know is a great founder. And when you see that, you should grab it, whatever fucking stage it is, whatever check size it is, wherever it is, you should just grab it. Like, because that's the rare thing. And so that 100K check, it didn't make me that much money on a relative basis to like some of my other, investments that were at earlier stages, and I had more ownership and blah, blah, blah. But like was so valuable that like, yeah, other people would have been like, oh no, that's a Series A. And that was wrong. You should just grab the good stuff when you see it.
Yeah. I think that you've got betting on the management team that you believe in, going for the market that you recognize, but you also had spark in there. And so this guy is armed with the right weapons, where some other little gladiator is going in there fighting with a feather against real steel,
Yep,
so
exactly. Yeah.
There was a little bit of a I could see you pulling me into that deal, even if I thought self-driving cars is really far off into the future. So bring us through the evolution. So you're still a single GP, which has got a ton of advantages and disadvantages. Yeah. Before we get into that, just bring me a quick evolution from doing a few deals on AngelList to where you're at now. Maybe describe where you're at right now, just for the impatience.
Yeah. So total AUM. So I've got about so I operate off of 3 vehicles. I have a $40 million early stage vehicle, which is just sort of like pre-seed, seed, before the Series A. I have a rolling fund, which anyone can join. Zach Coelius rolling fund. It's $10K a quarter to get in. You can join for a quarter, leave the next quarter. I don't care. It's basically a great way for like, I meet someone and they're like, hey, I want to invest with you. I'm like, great, join the rolling fund. And that operates in parallel. So it basically, those 2 funds they invest in the same deals. And then the main fund gets roughly 75% allocation, and the rolling fund gets the remainder. And that's about $5 million a year. So if you think about that in terms of like a normal fund, that would be like, call it $15 million. So that's roughly 55. And then I have a $30 million opportunity fund. I work with the industry ventures folks, and we've done a bunch of stuff together. And so they're the sole LP in that. So that's like a later stage, go find bigger opportunities that are in my portfolio. Or, Kyle calls me up and it's like, hey, we're doing this thing. And I'm like, sweet, here's some money. So roughly, and then I run a syndicate. The syndicate is about 3,500 members now. And I bring them into everything I possibly can, because they are literally, they're like a superpower. I have 3,500 people on my team who help me with deal flow. They send me deals every day. Diligence. They're really good at pointing out when I'm being stupid. Like, they're really good. They're like, Zach, that's dumb. Don't do that deal. Because they're like 3,500 people from like all the biggest tech firms, all the biggest banks, all the biggest private equity firms. And a lot of them are junior people, so they're smarter than the old people. Like, they're just like great.
But they're on the inside. There's like, oh, we've already built this at VMware. That's a utility. That's not a business. That's amazing feedback. And send me all the right links, and I'll put rolling fund, whatever, all this stuff in the show notes.
All in my user manual.
Say again?
On my user manual, in the bottom of my email, click in there. There's like all the links.
Okay. Yeah. So I already have that. And so getting through to like Hans, Jonathan, Victor, those guys at Industry Ventures, that's a real leap forward. That's full-blown institutional. They've got access to so many funds, and they've got their direct secondaries, their LP secondaries. When you're investing out of that opportunity fund, are they on the IC or you're, so they're on the investment committee on what you pull the trigger into with that?
Yeah. Through the short story of the long story is, in 2017, I had written a term sheet to HelloSign to give them a bridge. And the founder guys found out about it, and Brad called me up. Was like, hey, do you mind if we make this a B? And I was like, sure, let's do it. So it ended up being a $14 million B. And I had this $4 million chunk of it because I had kind of precipitated the whole process. And the Foundry guys had been on my board. They'd invested in Triget, so I knew them well. And so,
they did. Oh, that's interesting. So that's awesome. So Brad Felt and Seth and those guys were with you throughout your startup. So when you started coming into your own, they funded you, right? The Foundry is an LP, right?
No.
Oh, Foundry's not. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Brad and those guys.
They've got a whole institutional process over there that's like super slow. My fundraise literally lasted like 3 weeks, and all these institutional folks were like, well, and I'm like, Get out of here. I don't have time. Like, so their process is not so fast.
Okay, yeah. They've got like the guy from Texas, and
They got a bunch of things going on over there. They're doing great, but like institutional money is like, there's a whole other conversation about like institutional money is used to being slow, because in the old days, the fundraise process used to take like a year to raise a proper VC fund. And they're all, the institutional folks, a lot of them are still kind of in that old school thinking of like, well, I can go the way I used to go. And now with Zoom, I literally did back-to-back meetings. In 3 weeks, I raised my full fund and I was done. And like, whenever these institutional folks are like, well, we want to talk about, and I'm like, no, I don't have time for that. Here's my numbers, here's my companies, here's my approach. All the podcasts I've ever done are online. You can make a decision. You have like a week. And it was awesome. Cause like the institutional folks were like, I'm like, I'll catch you next time. It was like the best thing about the new world of fundraising, both from an entrepreneur's perspective and as a VC, is this shit right here. Zoom changes the world.
you know, I've had an institutional LP in Boston tell me, Andrew, you haven't even gone through generational transformation yet. And I was like, whoa, you mean I've got to retire? Like, I've got to retire as the GP before you'll invest? And they're like, well, I mean, that's typically what we're looking for. Can you get into cruise after it's no longer, you're the juice, right?
You know, the thing is, the old school LPs, they used to have a game where, because they wrote big checks, and like if you're a VC in the old world, if you wanted to go raise money, you had to fly out to meet somebody in Boston, which means you got to fly out there, get a hotel room, meet them, maybe go to dinner with them, you spend the day with them, fly back. So you got 3 days, 3 full days to go talk to one LP. And so you had to prioritize so people could write big checks, because you couldn't do many of those in one fundraise process. And so these big check writers, they basically had a lock. They had a monopoly on, like, you went to the people that you knew could write the check and that would probably write the check. And they had all the leverage. And now you can, like, I can do 10 in a day. And I'm like, boom, 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 boom. And so when any of them are like, well, I'm like, get out of here. And so then now the leverage is on me, because now all the family offices and like rich people who used to not get exposure, because I wasn't going to fly to like, Tennessee to meet with the family office that maybe would write a check 1 time out of 100. But now if it's 1 time out of 100, I'm like, okay, whatever, I can do that. I can do those calls. So now there's this huge influx of capital from the outside family office world who have the money, but they're just like more complicated to deal with. But if you have a big top of funnel, you can deal with a lot of them. They've come into basically the funnel. And so now the institutionals have just been incredibly deleveraged, and they don't even know it yet. Like, that's my favorite part, is they just think they still have leverage, but they have nothing.
I think they're going to miss a wave of vintage, basically, that they're going to be in the 1.2 billion vintage, which has to have 20% ownership target, where like these more emerging funds like ours are like, if I can get 2 million in, that fits into my spreadsheet of portfolio construction, I don't care about my ownership. I just believe in where it's going from here. And so that means like we could get into everything in theory, where the guy who's got that real institutional 50 million check and is wanting to write $100 million checks is limited on, like, he'll have to walk away from deals he knows are the 50x, 100x deals, because he's not getting his 20%, which is just, a rule that should die with a bad religion. It's just stupid. But so before we run out of time, Zach, give us your philosophy on portfolio construction. And you're drawing from some different buckets, but maybe your main bucket where you're the dictator on the investment committee.
Yeah, I like I said before, like, I just think portfolio construction has just been taken way beyond like what makes any sense to like this land of fantasy. And it's just like one of the many pieces of tribal knowledge that's in the VC industry that's just stupid. Like, yes, you need to construct a portfolio, but like at the end of the day, like, don't put more than like 5 to 10% of your capital in any given company. Make sure that basically a company can if the outcome hits what you think it can do, make sure that it's a VC return. So that means it can return, the whole fund, give or take. Or like at the end of the day, if it's a smaller check, make sure that it can still be material. And then other than that, don't worry about it, because the hard thing is access. Like, that's the hard bit. And then you get that access, And then what you want to do with that excess is you want to slot it into whatever fund it fits, and you want to have capital to support that opportunity. So like, because like when Kyle calls me up and he's like, I'm starting a company, it's going to be a $5 billion pre day one, I want to be able to say yes to that. And the thing is like, so you have to have your capital that comes from various different sources. You have to be able to put that against your opportunities. But otherwise, like a lot of this sort of like constrained portfolio construction bullshit that everybody like allows themselves to be shackled by, I think is a big mistake.
And I'd like to ask a bunch more questions, but talk about your view of valuations. We were talking about this 2-3 weeks ago in SF. With valuation, entry points are getting higher, exit points are getting higher. How is that going to impact your vintage?
I mean, at the end of the day, like you look at the outcomes that we're looking at today, the companies that are going public. When we sold Cruise for $1 billion, everyone's like, whoa, $1 billion exit. Now like farted $1 billion exit. So like the growth of outcomes is insane, right? I mean, 50, 100, $200 billion outcomes for a VC portfolio. And so, and when you look at the entry point, you know, we used to pay 8 million pre, now we pay 15 million pre, maybe, give or take. It hasn't even gone up anywhere near as much as the upside of the total market. So like the bottom end of the range actually is not going as much up as much as the top end of the market.
Or even a house in Menlo Park or a house in Hillsborough is going up too. There's kind of been, the inflation is kind of everywhere.
It's called growth. That's how it works.
Yeah,
and I think what everyone forgets is that like when you invest in the early stage, you're not investing for today's outcomes, you're investing for 10 years outcomes. So you think about in 10 years from now, what is inflation and growth and technological advances and market expansion and every other thing going to do to the upside? It's going to grow that shit a lot. And so like, I got to pay 2-3 times what I used to pay to get 10 times today's outcome, and probably 10 times from that, 10 years from now, the outcomes. I think early stage venture is still a giant steal if you make the right investments, which is the hard part, because it's a great way to lose money. Like there's so many tourists in the business right now who are just spraying into garbage companies, and they're all gonna I think we're gonna see in about 12-ish, 24 months, we're gonna see a lot of bankruptcies starting to happen, and people are gonna realize how hard early stage is. But doesn't matter, because it's like if you pick the good ones, you win. So that's
yeah. I think there's some tourists and celebrity investors that are going to decide in 2 years, boy, that was a bad idea. I'm going to get back to restaurants or whatever I'm good at. Wanted to ask you final question on what are you optimistic about in life?
Everything. Like the world is. I mean, the technology is the only hope, right? Like you look at global warming, humans can't solve that problem. Technology can solve that problem. You look at basically like the problems that we're facing across the world, technology. I'm like, long technology.
All right, man. Great answer. All right, Wilson, thanks so much. Let you go, and I'll find those links, make sure I got them right, and put them in the show notes. Talk to you soon, man.
Good talking to you.
Great seeing you. Bye for now.